For nearly 3 decades, the murder of the notorious Biggie has remained one of hip-hop's darkest and most haunting mysteries. Generations of fans have replayed the events of that tragic night over and over, searching for answers that never fully arrived. But now, former Bad Boy artist Mase is speaking more openly than ever before, and what he's saying is once again sending shockwaves through the music industry. Why would someone wait nearly 27 years to speak this openly about one of the most infamous murders in music history? And what happens when old wounds that were never properly healed suddenly reopen in front of the entire world? During a recent appearance on Cameron's sports talk show, what began as a casual conversation quickly transformed into something far more serious. At first, the discussion focused on the 2016 Bad Boy reunion tour, a nostalgic celebration meant to honor the legacy of an era that changed hip-hop forever. Fans remembered the concerts as emotional and triumphant, with old rivalries seemingly buried beneath bright stage lights and roaring applause. But for Mase, the memories attached to that reunion were not joyful. Instead of celebrating unity, he revisited the pain, fear, and trauma that still followed him decades after losing Biggie Smalls. His tone reportedly shifted the moment the subject moved toward Los Angeles and the events surrounding Biggie's death. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. The conversation no longer sounded like entertainment. It sounded personal. According to Mase, Biggie's murder was never random chaos caused by a reckless street shooting. In his eyes, it was something calculated, something connected to the toxic East Coast-West Coast rivalry that dominated hip-hop during the 1990s. That feud had already taken the life of Tupac Shakur only months earlier, leaving the music industry drowning in paranoia, anger, and suspicion. Could two of the greatest rappers of all time really have become victims of a conflict that spiraled far beyond music? And if so, who truly benefited from all the violence and division? Mase suggested that if the tension surrounding Tupac's death and the coastal rivalry had never escalated so dangerously, Biggie might still be alive today. But the most explosive part of his comments wasn't simply the theory itself, it was who he appeared to hold responsible. When the Bad Boy reunion tour arrived in Los Angeles in 2016, Sean Combs shocked audiences by inviting Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg onto the stage. For many fans, the moment symbolized healing. Cameras captured smiles, handshakes, and applause as people celebrated what looked like the end of one of hip-hop's ugliest chapters. To the audience, it appeared historic. But behind the scenes, according to Mase, things felt very different. Reports later surfaced that Mase refused to participate in parts of that moment because, in his mind, standing beside individuals connected to Biggie's death felt deeply wrong. Whether symbolic or literal, the emotional weight of that belief clearly never left him. Think about that for a moment. How would you react if you believed the people tied to your friend's murder were suddenly being embraced as family? Could you stand under flashing lights, smile for photographers, and pretend decades of pain had simply disappeared? Or would the memories still feel as fresh as the night everything changed? For Mase, Los Angeles itself carried emotional scars that never healed. He wasn't hearing stories secondhand. He was there the night Biggie was killed. He rode in the convoy. He witnessed the confusion, the panic, and the terror that erupted after the shooting. While fans watched the tragedy unfold on television screens the next morning, Mase was living through the nightmare in real time. And according to him, there are still details from that night that simply do not make sense. One of the central names repeatedly connected to the case over the years is Gene Deal, the former Bad Boy bodyguard who has spent years publicly questioning the official narrative surrounding Biggie's murder. Gene Deal was present during many of the events leading up to the shooting, and his interviews have fueled endless speculation about what may have happened behind the scenes. For years, Gene has claimed that Biggie's murder was not random violence but an organized hit carried out with planning and coordination. His allegations became even more controversial because he described suspicious behavior occurring long before the fatal shots were fired. According to stories later referenced by Mase, individuals allegedly connected to death row records were supposedly tracking Biggie's movements throughout the evening. Questions were reportedly being asked about where Bad Boy artists were staying, what clubs they planned to attend, and what time they intended to leave. At the time, those questions may have sounded harmless. After all, artists and crews constantly monitored one another during that chaotic era of hip-hop competition. But looking back years later, Mase believes those conversations may have carried a far darker purpose. Was someone gathering information to prepare for an ambush? Or were those questions simply ordinary curiosity exaggerated by time and grief? That uncertainty continues to haunt the case. Another detail that has fueled suspicion involves the vehicle believed to have carried the shooter. Witnesses over the years have claimed the car did not appear to be chasing Biggie's convoy through the streets of Los Angeles. Instead, some accounts suggest the vehicle seemed to already be waiting near the intersection outside the Peterson Automotive Museum where the shooting occurred. That single detail changed everything for many investigators and fans. If the shooter was already waiting there, how did they know exactly where Biggie's vehicle would stop? Who knew the route? Who knew the timing? And who could have provided that information in advance? Those questions have lingered for decades without clear answers. Mase also spoke about the strange security situation surrounding the Los Angeles trip. According to multiple interviews given by Gene Deal over the years, unfamiliar faces seemed to appear around Bad Boy during that visit. Some individuals allegedly knew private details about the group's schedule and movements despite having no obvious reason to possess that information. Even more disturbing were claims involving security officers assigned to protect the convoy. According to long-standing allegations, some off-duty police officers connected to security arrangements reportedly disappeared shortly before the shooting occurred. Why would protection suddenly vanish at the exact moment it was needed most? Was it coincidence? Negligence? Or something far more deliberate? That question became central to countless conspiracy theories surrounding Biggie's death. As years passed, investigators, journalists, and former insiders repeatedly pointed toward allegations involving corrupt members of the Los Angeles Police Department. Former officers David Mack and Rafael Perez became heavily linked to rumors surrounding death row circles during the 1990s. Several people connected to the hip-hop industry claimed those officers maintained relationships with death row associates despite department rules restricting such connections. Critics argued that corruption inside the LAPD may have interfered with the murder investigation itself, preventing critical evidence from being properly pursued. Whether those claims were true or not, the allegations created an atmosphere of distrust that still surrounds the case today. One detective who became deeply convinced of possible police corruption was Russell Poole. Poole spent years investigating possible links between corrupt officers and Biggie's murder. Over time, he reportedly became frustrated by what he believed was resistance from within the department itself. Imagine dedicating years of your life to solving a murder, only to feel that the deeper you looked, the more obstacles appeared in front of you. How far would someone go to protect powerful figures if damaging secrets were truly involved? Russell Poole eventually left the LAPD, but he never stopped speaking publicly about his suspicions. To many people, his persistence added credibility to theories suggesting the truth had never fully surfaced. Meanwhile, Biggie's murder case slowly transformed from an active investigation into a cultural obsession. Documentaries, interviews, books, podcasts, and online debates kept the mystery alive year after year. Every new witness statement sparked another wave of speculation. Every old photograph became potential evidence in the eyes of internet investigators. And still, no one has ever been officially charged with Biggie's murder. That fact alone continues to frustrate fans around the world. How could one of the most famous murders in entertainment history remain unsolved for so long? With celebrities, witnesses, police reports, and decades of media attention involved, shouldn't the truth have emerged by now? Some believe fear kept witnesses silent. Others believe corruption buried critical evidence. And some argue that too many influential people benefited from keeping the full story hidden. The emotional toll of the tragedy also stretched far beyond the headlines. Biggie's death devastated his family, his friends, and the artists who came up beside him during hip-hop's golden era. For many people close to him, the trauma never truly ended because there was never closure. That lingering pain may explain why Mase's recent comments resonated so strongly with audiences. His words didn't sound like someone discussing a distant historical event. They sounded like someone still haunted by memories he could never escape. And perhaps that is why the case continues to fascinate people decades later. At its core, this story is bigger than music. It is about fame, loyalty, betrayal, violence, power, and unanswered questions that refuse to disappear. It is about an era when hip-hop became so consumed by rivalry and image that real lives were ultimately lost. Could Biggie and Tupac have survived if the industry had handled conflict differently? Did powerful individuals secretly encourage division because controversy generated money and attention? And most importantly, Will the full truth about what happened that night in Los Angeles ever finally come to light? Even after 27 years, those questions still echo through hip-hop culture like ghosts that refuse to disappear. The murder of the notorious B.I.G. remains one of the most haunting mysteries in entertainment history, a case surrounded by rumors, betrayals, whispered conversations, and theories that continue to divide fans decades later. And every time someone close to the story speaks publicly, the wounds reopen all over again. That is exactly what happened when Mase recently shared deeply personal thoughts about the final days surrounding Biggie's murder. For many people, these weren't just random internet theories coming from outsiders chasing attention. Mase had been there. He had lived through the chaos of the late 1990s East Coast-West Coast rap war. He had watched friendships collapse, alliances shift, and fear spread through the music industry during one of hip-hop's darkest periods. And because of that, his comments carried emotional weight that immediately reignited public fascination. But things became even more controversial when the discussion turned toward Snoop Dogg. According to Mase, stories circulating among people close to the situation suggested Snoop had allegedly been asking questions about Biggie's whereabouts in the hours leading up to the fatal shooting in Los Angeles. To Mase, that detail never sat right with him. If Snoop and Biggie were truly friends, as later interviews and public appearances sometimes suggested, then why was there concern about tracking his movements that night? That question alone was enough to send social media into chaos. Almost instantly, fans began revisiting old interviews, documentaries, and long-forgotten rumors from the late 1990s. Old clips resurfaced online. Conspiracy theories exploded again. And once more, the internet found itself debating one of hip-hop's most painful mysteries. Still, it is important to be absolutely clear. No court has ever convicted Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, or anyone mentioned by Mase in connection with Biggie's murder. Many of the stories discussed over the years remain allegations, disputed accounts, or theories shared by people who were close to the culture during that era. But even without criminal convictions, the emotional impact of these suspicions has never disappeared. And perhaps that is what makes this story so compelling nearly 3 decades later. To outsiders, it may seem like another celebrity crime story frozen in the past. But to the people who actually lived through it, the pain never truly faded away. The murder of Biggie was not simply the death of a famous rapper. For many, it represented the collapse of an entire era, a time when hip-hop was exploding globally while violence and paranoia grew behind the scenes. Mase described the emotional difficulty of watching former rivals eventually appear together publicly while Biggie's murder remained unsolved. Years passed. Artists reunited. Business deals continued. Concert tours were celebrated. Smiles appeared in interviews. Yet the central question remained unanswered. Who was really responsible? And perhaps even more disturbing, how many people may have known more than they admitted publicly? Could you truly move on if you believed your best friend had been betrayed? Could you sit quietly for years while the world celebrated peace and reconciliation if you privately suspected that the truth had never been told? That emotional conflict appears to sit at the center of why Mase has finally started speaking more openly now. For years, Mase largely stepped away from the spotlight. At different points in his life, he left the music industry entirely, focusing instead on religion, personal growth, and rebuilding his identity outside of fame. Fans watched him transform from a flashy bad boy superstar into someone far more reflective and cautious about the entertainment business. And maybe that distance changed him. Maybe time gave him the freedom to say things he once felt pressured to keep private. Many fans believe Mase no longer feels obligated to protect industry relationships or remain silent to preserve old alliances that mattered during the height of the rap industry's power struggles. After carrying these thoughts for almost 30 years, perhaps silence simply became too heavy. Because silence can become a burden of its own. Especially when the people involved are no longer here to tell their side of the story. The atmosphere surrounding Biggie's death has always felt larger than a normal criminal investigation. The case became tangled in celebrity influence, gang allegations, corrupt police accusations, and the dangerous culture surrounding the East Coast-West Coast feud. By 1997, fear had become normal inside hip-hop. The murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie had transformed rap music into something darker. What once looked like lyrical competition had spiraled into real bloodshed. Fans who once argued over albums suddenly watched funerals replace award shows. And even today, Many people still wonder whether those murders were truly separate incidents or connected pieces of a much larger web. Another name that frequently appears in discussions surrounding Biggie's murder is Wardell "Poochie" Faust. Over the years, various investigators, former insiders, and journalists alleged that he may have played a role in the shooting itself. Reports claimed he had connections to circles affiliated with death row records before his death in 2003. But once again, allegations never became convictions. The deeper people dig into this case, the more complicated everything becomes. Witnesses changed stories. Key figures died. Rumors spread faster than evidence. Entire documentaries have been built around conflicting accounts from people who claim they know what happened. Yet despite endless speculation, no final answer has ever fully satisfied the public. And maybe that uncertainty is exactly why the fascination refuses to die. People are naturally drawn to unfinished stories. The idea that one of music's biggest stars could be murdered in plain sight, surrounded by fame, security, and public attention, yet still leave behind no definitive resolution, continues to feel unbelievable to many fans. Even more troubling are the long-standing allegations involving former death row security chief Reggie Wright Jr. Wright has repeatedly denied involvement in Biggie's murder, and no criminal charges were ever filed against him related to the case. Still, theories surrounding his name continue circulating online and in documentaries. That is the strange reality of this mystery. Even denials never fully end the speculation. Every few years, another interview appears. Another insider speaks. Another former associate hints at hidden truths. And suddenly, the case feels alive again. Mase's recent comments have now pushed the conversation back into mainstream attention once more. Supporters of his claims argue that his perspective matters because he was part of Biggie's inner circle during the rapper's final chapter. He witnessed the tension personally. He experienced the fear surrounding Bad Boy Records during that period. He understood the emotional atmosphere in ways outsiders never could. To those fans, Mase is not simply repeating gossip. They believe he is finally revealing thoughts he has carried privately for decades. Critics, however, see the situation very differently. They argue that accusations based heavily on rumors and old street stories can damage reputations without solid evidence. They point out that many theories surrounding Biggie's murder have circulated for years without producing criminal convictions or definitive proof. And they ask an important question themselves. After nearly 3 decades, how much of the story is still based on memory, emotion, and speculation rather than verifiable facts? That debate continues dividing hip-hop fans today. Some people believe the truth has already been quietly known within certain circles for years. Others believe the full reality became impossible to uncover long ago because too much evidence disappeared and too many key witnesses died. There are also those who think fear played a major role in the silence. Because during the late 1990s, speaking publicly could carry real consequences. The music industry was not just about entertainment at that time. Money, street influence, gang affiliations, and personal loyalty often overlapped in dangerous ways. Many artists and executives operated in environments where mistrust was constant. So how many people stayed quiet out of fear? How many chose survival over truth? And if someone did know what happened, would they even feel safe speaking openly today? Those questions continue haunting the case. Even younger generations who were not alive during Biggie's career have become fascinated by the mystery. Through documentaries, podcasts, interviews, and viral social media clips, the story keeps finding new audiences. Part of that fascination comes from Biggie himself. The notorious B.I.G. was more than a rapper. To many fans, he represented raw storytelling talent, charisma, and the transformation of hip-hop into a global cultural force. His music painted vivid pictures of ambition, struggle, danger, and survival. And just as his career reached incredible heights, it ended violently and suddenly. That unfinished legacy still affects people emotionally. Fans continue asking what Biggie's career might have become if he had lived longer. Would he have expanded into business like other rap moguls? Would he and former rivals eventually have reconciled publicly? Could hip-hop itself have evolved differently if both Tupac and Biggie had survived? Those unanswered possibilities add another layer of sadness to the mystery. And perhaps that is why Mase's comments resonated so strongly. They reminded people that behind the documentaries and internet theories were real friendships, real trauma, and real grief that never fully healed. For Mase, this was not entertainment. This was personal. Watching the industry move forward while Biggie's murder stayed unresolved likely created years of internal conflict. Every reunion, every nostalgic interview, every celebration of 1990s hip-hop may have reopened old emotional scars. Because how do you celebrate an era that ended in tragedy? How do you smile beside people you once viewed with suspicion? And how do you separate business from pain when someone close to you never came home? Those emotional questions may never have clear answers. But one thing is undeniable. Mase's decision to finally speak openly has forced millions of people to revisit one of entertainment's most infamous unsolved crimes yet again. Some believe renewed public pressure could eventually push authorities to reopen parts of the investigation more aggressively. Others think too much time has passed and too many crucial pieces are permanently gone. Still, the conversation refuses to disappear. Because this story is no longer only about music. It is about loyalty, betrayal, fear, silence, power, fame, and the uncomfortable possibility that people close to the truth may have remained quiet for decades. And if Biggie's death truly was a setup, as Mase believes, then perhaps the greatest mystery is not simply who pulled the trigger that night in Los Angeles. Maybe the real mystery is how many people allegedly knew pieces of the truth, and why so few were willing to speak.